Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we are back and we're going to be talking about some NFL free agency signings that we love and that we hate.
Hike!
Well, let's start off on a more positive note, Joe. We're going to talk about the players that we loved where they went. So why don't you talk about your first one that you are quite excited about where they're going?
Yeah, I'm going to go with wide receiver Davante Adams. And I get, he's 32 years old. By the time the season ends, he'll be 33. But I love the fact that he went to the Los Angeles Rams, and Rams obviously moved on for Cooper Kupp, creating opportunities there at the wide receiver 2 position, alongside of Puka Nacua in the offense. And I'm excited to see what Sean McVay's got planned for Davante, and with Matthew Stafford returning to the Rams as well, and just that offense, I think. Davante is going to have room to make a decent amount of plays for him.
That's interesting. I mean, I guess, are you thinking that he'll eat into Puka's targets? Because, Puka's the guy who gets a lot of the volume. Cooper Kupp has become kind of an afterthought. So do you think that Davante Adams is going to be more of a 1A, 1B situation versus a 1, and I think a clear 2 with Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Puka is the 1A. He will be, but I think there's, like I said, I think with the passing game that they have, I think there's plenty of room for Davante to still make plays. And, I know you think Cooper's Kupp's washed. I'm not necessarily sure I'm convinced of it, but maybe the Rams are thinking that is the case. I mean, they moved on from him and filled him in. It's not like they went younger at the receiver position. They get Davante Adams, who's 32 years old, but Davante still got juice. I mean, he showed it with the Jets last year, and creating plays. So I think despite Puka being the clear number 1 guy, I think even being the number 2 there in Davante Adams, I think there's plenty of space for him to still provide upside for the wide receiver position for fantasy.
Yeah, I could see the value of the creativity with Sean McVay. That to me is where you could give a good argument to me that he'll find and make plays make ways for him to make plays. Davante Adams, that is. I actually think you haven't mentioned this, but honestly, I think maybe one of the more reasons why I don't love the landing spot, but I think one of the reasons why I may like it, and you haven't brought it up, is the fact that also Demarcus Robinson is no longer on the team. Because I know you're going to laugh, but he garnered a decent amount of targets. And, we talk about the targets that are available, both him and Kupp are gone. So unless you expect Jordan Whittington to maybe step up and become more involved in that offense. I mean, they re-signed Tutu Atwell, but to me, he's a non-factor. So, there's been a tendency of the Rams to include multiple players. So I just wonder as to what truly Davante Adams' volume is going to be.
Well, I mean, I think there's a chance that he has more increased volume than even Cooper Kupp did, and he's honestly been a more reliable player and more durable guy, being able to stay on the field where Kupp hasn't been available, and I think that was part of the Rams' decision there. So I think that's, like I said, I think Davante Adams in this offense still provides a ton of upside for fantasy.
And Demarcus Robinson, 64 targets, so
Right, but a lot of that, I mean, Kupp missed games too, so some of that is
Puka missed games too.
Right. So, I mean, that is why he was more prevalent. Like, there's a reason I didn't mention him, man. I'm not worried about him. It was always Kupp and Puka. Now it's going to be Kupp and Davante Adams, and I really like.
You mean Puka and Davante Adams, not Kupp?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Puka. Sorry.
Getting your wires crossed there, Joe. So I'll talk about the first player that I love the landing spot, and that's going to be running back Najee Harris. We saw what the Chargers were able to do with J.K. Dobbins last year with Gus Edwards. Some had thought that Kamani Vidal, this late round draft pick, was going to come on the scenes and become this next, budding star. Didn't happen. So to me, it's like Najee Harris is a type of running back that Jim Harbaugh typically likes. I mean, he's a bruiser. He can be somewhat of that bell cow guy who just gets a lot of volume. So when it comes to Najee's value, I mean, I don't see how anybody could say his value worsened at all. To me, it only got better from where he was in Pittsburgh to where he is today. Now, with the Chargers.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you watch any of our videos, you'll know I love this because I projected Najee Harris to go to the Chargers, and for the exact reason you said. I mean, just the rushing volume is going to be there. I mean, look at J.K. Dobbins went in and had a heck of a season, was able to stay healthy, and Najee's going to get the bulk of the volume. I fully expect them to bring someone in and draft somebody to kind of be the complementary back. But you're talking about Najee, who's been a durable back, 1,000 yards every year, has played every single game over the seasons he's been in the league, and I don't see any reason that doesn't continue. And not to mention that he's going to be playing behind a much better offensive line now with the Chargers as well.
Yeah, I think he might be a guy that you see a lot of trades happening with Najee because, in a dynasty perspective, it was only a 1-year deal, which isn't great for Najee.
Yeah.
It's kind of a prove it scenario. And if he doesn't, then I don't know what happens. So he is a little bit of a risky gamble. And I do think it's kind of interesting. And I think it's probably due to the fact it's because of how good of a running back class it is. But J.K. Dobbins is nowhere to be found. Had a really good year last year. Hasn't been signed with anybody. Now, he signed later on in free agency last time around. Probably something again happens that way. But a little surprised that we haven't heard even just an inkling about J.K. Dobbins. So at this point in time, I really like it for Najee. Question is, will he be having the same J.K. Dobbins treatment a year from now? We don't really know what his market is.
No, he won't be. No, because he doesn't carry the injury risk that J.K. Dobbins does.
No, he doesn't. I agree.
That's part of the problem. I mean, that's why J.K. Dobbins got signed late by the Chargers last season. He was able to stay, for the most part, healthy this past season with the Chargers. So J.K. Dobbins carries all that risk, and he'll definitely be signed later in the offseason, added into training camp rosters after the draft and after teams get a look at what's going on. But I think Najee and J.K. Dobbins heading into this next offseason will be in different spots. If Najee has a really good year, I think he'll be highly sought after.
You think? But why not? Do you think it was his doing that he would want a 1-year deal so that he could hit the market again, or do you think the Chargers were? I mean,
it's
what
just
kind
the Chargers thing. I mean, they don't have. I mean, I mean, they were in a pretty good cap situation, so I maybe they just don't want to commit the running backs for the long term. Which probably isn't a bad strategy. And I think part of it is just knowing the draft class and knowing they're going to draft one too. And are they going to fall in love with one of these running backs in the draft class that they'd want as their future back, but realize Najee's a clear upgrade over Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. So, we'll see what ultimately happens. But I think it's favorable for Najee somewhat too. I mean, if he has a really good year, we've seen kind of teams change their viewpoints on running backs if you do really well. I mean, Josh Jacobs with the Packers, Saquon Barkley with the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, this free agent market was a lot different at the running back position. I mean, Najee was the number one guy coming out, but everyone kind of just knows what he is. He's not the big flashy guy. He's not going to change over your offense like a guy like Saquon Barkley does.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So let's head over to another love player you got, Joe. Who do you got?
Yep, and I'll just preface this, Steve. I know you're going to call me a homer, but I don't really care. And I'm going to go with tight end Evan Engram, now with the Broncos. And look, this guy is couldn't have gone to a better spot, I think, than the Broncos. He already put it out on Twitter. He's potentially alluding to the fact that he's going to be the quote-unquote joker with Sean Payton. And if you've been following along, you know how valuable that is to Sean Payton's offense. He's been searching for one since he's been with Denver. Evan Engram just might be that guy. And the Broncos really needed clearing away, tight end that they could utilize and have a threat down the field. Evan Engram provides that. I mean, they've had guys like Adam Troutman, Lucas Kroll, just kind of pieces here and there, but they have a true tight end in Evan Engram. And if he's able to stay healthy, I think he's going to have a really good year.
So you're not going to like this. I almost put Evan Engram in my hate spot. And the reason being is because I know we've been hearing all this about Sean Payton and the Joker, but is he really going to get as much production as he got in Jacksonville? I mean, Evan Engram did pretty well. I mean, you're looking at, back in the 2023 season, he had 143 targets, 114 catches, 963 yards, and 4 touchdowns. This past year,
how
only
good
played
was
10
Jimmy
games.
Graham and like Jeremy Shockey and guys like that, and Sean Payton's offense as a tight end?
Jimmy Graham, yes, but Jimmy Graham and Evan Engram are not the same player. And besides Jimmy Graham, you're talking about Jeremy Shockey, I don't think he had that great of a year.
No, I mean he was also older at
He
the
had
time.
Benjamin Watson. I mean, he's had other different tight ends.
Benjamin Watson, exactly.
He did okay, but I mean, yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if he'll get. You're talking about it being that great of a fit. I don't really know. Are they really going to force feed Evan Engram the ball in Denver? I don't know if I see it.
I think they will, because outside of Courtland Sutton, they don't have a reliable wide receiver. They have a bunch of guys that are young and interesting that haven't fully developed yet. And now they have Ingram. I trust me. I think he's gonna. There's a reason they brought him in. And Sean Payton has been looking for a joker at either the running back or tight end position. And I think it's going to be Evan Engram. And you mentioned the Jaguars. I mean, the Broncos offense is a lot better than the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I do think there's potential for him to kind of be force-fed that number 2 option in the offense.
I think that Payton will, I mean, you see the size of his play sheet. I think he'll have situational packages and plays that will be drawn up to execute for Engram. But I'm not as convinced as you are that they're going to just force feed Evan Engram the ball. I actually believe that they'll probably draft some sort of joker type running back because the class is so good. And that player may be getting a lot of attention as well to add different dimensions of the offense. So don't hear me out. I'm not saying that Evan Engram is going to be like irrelevant. I just don't. I think he was better in Jacksonville. I don't think we're going to see him being better in Denver.
I think he's going to be better in Denver, no doubt. I mean, yeah, I really do.
I mean, you're a Broncos fan.
But I just think I can see him, like I've been telling you, man, like the third and shorts and everything, just with the way that these guys haven't been able to get open and convert on the third downs. I see Ingram kind of being able to be that guy and being that security blanket for second-year quarterback Bo Nix. I mean, I always say tight ends are the young quarterback's best friend. Now the Broncos got one, and it got a guy who's also a playmaker, in terms of yard after catch as well.
Well, I guess we're going to find out. The other thing too is he's never really been a red zone guy either. I mean, he had 6 touchdowns in his rookie year. Besides that, he's been 4 touchdowns. You're talking about wanting a guy in the red area to be able to target, to create separation. Maybe he'll do something he hasn't done yet in his career. I'm just not as
hasn't. I mean, Sean Payton, man, he'll get a guy open. I mean, he knows how to get guys open, and I trust him a heck of a lot more than the coaching staffs he's been dealing with over in Jacksonville. It's been an absolute dumpster fire over there.
So the other player that I'm hating, we were talking about, hating. What am I talking about? We're still on live here. I was so on the hate train with Evan Engram that I was switching to hate. So no, we're still loving life here, Joe. That's going to be Chris Godwin. I think it's, he decided to take a hometown discount and stay with Tampa Bay. We saw what Chris Godwin was able to do for those first few games before he got injured. And, obviously he's going to be able to have, I would imagine, a full recovery, from that injury, unfortunately. But, I mean, to think he had, 50 catches, 576 yards, and 5 touchdowns in 7 games is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he was on pace to have a really, really good season. And I understand that some may be a little concerned, with the fact that you had, he's escaping me. Why I'm not thinking.
McMillan?
There you go. Jalen McMillan. Thank you. Rookie out of Washington. He started to kind of show up a little bit, but I'm not that concerned about that. I think Godwin kind of goes back right into where he was in the offense. And I was really concerned if he was going to go to New England or some of these other places he was rumored. I was like, oh boy. I thought his fantasy stock could crater or definitely take a sizable bump down. So to me, this is a great landing spot for Chris Godwin, for Mike Evans, for Baker, the whole offense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this was always the best option for him. I do think he would have been still a very good fantasy option no matter where he went. But obviously this was the absolute best thing, was for him to return to Tampa Bay, keep that familiar with Baker. and that offense. And like you said, being able to play alongside a guy like Mike Evans as well, be that number 2 in the offense. And we're talking about a guy who was the fantasy wide receiver 2 on the year before the injury as well. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see. I'm not expecting that type of, that pace to happen again. But I still think, obviously, for fantasy, this was the best case scenario.
So let's head over to the hate side now, Joe. Who do you got for your first hate?
Yeah, I'm going to go with wide receiver DK Metcalf. And I don't know about you, Steve. I'm just not loving this, matchup with him and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They already have George Pickens. Him and Pickens have the same type of game. It's the deep down the field stuff. And, not to mention, who the hell is going to be the quarterback in the Pittsburgh? We still don't know that answer. I'd feel better about DK if I knew it was going to be, Russell Wilson, just having that familiarity. We'll see if it's Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it seems like he wants the Vikings job if they're willing to offer it to him. That's kind of what's holding this thing up. But for DK, I've never been that big of a DK guy with him in Seattle. It would have been interesting if he would have been able to stay in Seattle now with Sam Darnold, them even bringing in Cooper Kupp. I mean, with JSN would have been interesting, that whole dynamic. But I'm concerned just from the standpoint of, I know the Pittsburgh Steelers were very desperate to find a wide receiver, but I thought they were going to find somebody to more complement George Pickens instead of bringing a guy that's going to be basically the same guy.
Yeah, just to be clear, he was not a free agent. This was a trade, but this is a guy we're accepting it because he was a guy who moved from a different team during the free agency period. If you didn't pick him, I was going to pick him. I've been more of a DK fan. Now we are a prisoner of the moment right now. If Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson comes in, do we hate it as much? But it's still temporary, right? And we're looking at it from a dynasty perspective. Even if they bring in Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers, it's probably a year deal, and then they're back again. This whole process again. Who's going to be the quarterback? So I mean, Pittsburgh has a rich history of having really high performing receivers. So it's possible that DK would be able to do that, but I just don't see it. I don't see Pickens and DK Metcalf coexisting for a long period of time. I think Pickens is going to have to be off the roster because they just signed DK to a 5-year deal. Like you said, they have two similar traits of what they do. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me unless they're just going to throw the deep ball all the time. But they don't even – I mean, they lost Najee. I mean, they just have Jalen Warren unless they draft a running back. It's really early yet. Obviously, the Steelers are still forming their offense and their team. But I'm not really impressed by this landing spot for DK. There would have been far or other ones I would have been much more interested in than him going to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, these guys are both absolute alphas and constantly want the ball. I really just don't see them working out on the same team.
He definitely fits the mold though of a Pittsburgh Steelers receiver. They like a little attitude. They definitely do. Or swagger. I'll make it more of a positive thing. It's more of they like their swagger when it comes to receivers.
Yeah, there's the swagger though, but I mean DK. Him and Pickens, they are attitudes, and it is a negative thing because they provide negative plays on the field because they can't manage it, and it leads to personal foul penalties. I mean, there's difference between just having that like cool swag and confidence about yourself, but their stuff is just bad attitudes in my opinion, and it's generally negative because it's causing those negative personal foul plays.
So you alluded to it earlier. You kind of let the cat out of the bag here, Joe. But my first hate's going to be wide receiver Cooper Kupp, and I'm sticking by this. To me, Cooper Kupp rose from the ranks, a guy, a later round pick out of Eastern Washington that Sean McVay was able to mold and create to be this player, Super Bowl MVP, player. If the Rams are moving off of him, to me, that's extremely concerning. I think he's washed. I think why would the Rams move away from him if they didn't think he still had a lot in the tank? I could even remember Peter Schrager, who's very much plugged into that organization. And you and I talked about it, and it was smokescreen season in August, but he was saying, Cooper Kupp is in the best shape of his life, and he's going to do wonders this year for the Rams, and blah 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 blah. He couldn't stay healthy. Not to mention he goes to Seattle, and this is another one that kind of we talked about. Pittsburgh doesn't make a lot of sense. Both Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith and Jigba play a lot in the slot. And Jackson Smith and Jigba excelled. He was the best or one of the best, in the slot. So now you bring both of them in there. You got nobody on the outside. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Are you just going to have two guys in the slot, in Kubiak's system? And I'm not even sure, when it comes to Sam Darnold. I mean, he got the yips towards the end of Minnesota. He benefited greatly from a guy like Justin Jefferson being his receiver. So, I don't think the creativity is going to be nearly as good as what it was in LA with Sean McVay. So I'm all out on Cooper Kupp completely. I know you wanted the Denver Broncos to get him, but to me, if Sean McVay doesn't want him, I don't want anything to do with him.
Yeah, I mean, had his price tag been lower, I think the Broncos would have had him. I don't think Cooper Kupp's washed. I still think he's got something left in the tank. But I mean, as far as, wanting him to be like a wide receiver 2 for your fantasy, I mean, those days are going to be gone. Just simply because he can't stay healthy, but I don't think he's washed. I don't like the landing spot with the Seattle Seahawks either. I mean, you mentioned it. They don't have any. I mean, JSN, he's a rising star in the league, and I'm excited about him. But like you said, they're both slot players. I would have liked him to go to, Cooper Kupp to be with a situation where he's got more of a 1A where he can be that 1B. And that's just not Seattle. And like you said, with Sam Darnold, where you get to see like if he has turned the corner and if he is going to be able to support wide receivers in an offense, or how much was it just the perfect situation with Kevin O'Connell and being able to play with guys like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson at tight end, even guy like Jalen Naylor too. I mean, they have three pretty good wide receivers there. Yeah. I don't love the landing spot for Kupp. I don't necessarily hate him as much as you're hating on him.
Well, let me ask you a question here. Okay, he's 31 years old, signed a 3-year deal, $15 million a year.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen's 32. I think Stephon Diggs is 31. Amari Cooper's 31. Though those guys are washed. And DeAndre Hopkins is 32, and he can only get a 1-year small contract. But Cooper Kupp, who's 31 years old, who has been able to be on the field these past 3 seasons, he gets a 3-year deal with $15 million a year. You tell me how that makes sense.
I don't know, but obviously the Seattle Seahawks don't think Cooper Kupp is washed. I mean, they're giving him, like you said, a 3-year deal. I think part of the problem is just Keenan Allen's always just kind of been under the radar guy and an undervalued, underappreciated guy. Stephon Diggs is coming off of an injury. Not saying it's right. I just think that's currently where it sits. And, Keenan Allen will be kind of in the second wave of free agency. Probably will sign somewhere maybe after the draft just to see where teams shake out. And probably, yeah. I mean, Amari Cooper, I think Amari Cooper is closer to being washed than anybody. I'm not so sure what he's got left. And talk about a guy who's always dinged up and trying to play through something, but ultimately affects his fantasy value.
Who is your final hate player, Joe?
Yeah, I'm going to go with running back Rico Dowdle going to the Carolina Panthers. And I know I like Rico Dowdle. I liked him in Dallas. I thought he was a good fantasy player. But going to the Carolina Panthers, who they really like Chuba Hubbard, signed him to that extension. So I hated the landing spot. I was hoping Rico Dowdle was honestly going to go back to Dallas and still be kind of fantasy relevant. But now that he's with the Carolina Panthers, just don't want any part of him. And honestly, like, shows you a lot of how this whole situation with Jonathan Brooks is happening there in Carolina too. I know he wasn't planning on really playing this year, but just moving forward, what they think about him. So yeah, I don't honestly. I'm kind of out just on the Carolina Panthers running backfield, not just Rico Dowdle here.
When you mentioned him, I was kind of like, what? You like Rico Dowdle?
Yeah.
But hey, if you like him, you like him. What I thought was interesting, I don't know if you thought this was interesting or not, but I'm just double checking to be sure I'm correct on this. Did you know that Rico Dowdle got more money than Najee Harris?
I didn't know that. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Rico Dowdle got 1 year $6.2 million, and I think Najee got like 1 year like 5.5 or 5.4 million.
No, that ain't right. Didn't I thought?
Right. No, look it up. Look it up. I'm telling you right now that Najee Harris got less money than Rico Dowdle. I'm telling you right now. I just looked at it. Najee Harris got 1 year, $5.25 million, and Rico Dowdle got 1 year, $6.25 million. He got a whole extra $1 million.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know.
Now, I don't know the guaranteed. I didn't look at closely on the guaranteed. Maybe Najee has a higher guarantee than Rico Dowdle, because that's really what it matters. Anyways, although neither of them are going to get cut. So I don't think so. But I did think that was kind of shocking.
I think Najee's is fully guaranteed, and then he had a 3.75 signing bonus.
Oh, okay. So he got more gain. But I just thought it was interesting that at least from the
I didn't realize that. I mean, that is kind of crazy. I mean, I know I would assume Najee Harris is older, but
no, Rico, I don't think so. I think Rico Dowdle, to my knowledge, Rico Dowdle is older than Najee Harris, but Rico Dowdle's 26 and Najee Harris is 27. Okay, so a year.
Yeah. So, but still, I mean, it's kind of wild. Rico Dowdle. I mean, I know the Panthers will spend whatever it takes to get guys, but an extra $1 million than Najee. That is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short here. I don't disagree with you. I wasn't really a big fan of Dowdle to begin with, but this to me is really bad for Jonathan Brooks. I mean, if you drafted him in the first round, you're absolutely devastated. I mean, the guy tore his ACL. He's not going to be there probably for the entire year. This move solidifies it. They basically want to get a handcuff or a backup, I should say, behind Chuba Hubbard. And they got rid of Miles Sanders as well. So, yeah, I don't like the move for Rico Dowdle at all. He had a great opportunity in Dallas. I think he could have taken more advantage of it. And now he's, to me, unless Chuba Hubbard gets injured, he's just a backup guy to have on your roster. So the last guy we're going to be talking about here, and if you're still with us, this is not a very exciting one. So we're not ending off out of the bang here. That's going to be tight end Juwan Johnson. To me, you look at how much money this guy was given, and I don't understand what on earth the Saints are doing. They don't have any money to begin with. And to me, he's a guy who is interesting, but I don't want him with Derek Carr as a quarterback. I have no interest in that. I think he would have been better off going to a different landing spot. You've seen guys like, and I'm not saying Miami in particular because of Jonnu Smith, but you saw guys like Jonnu Smith be able to change teams, and he was able to excel, in a different landing spot in Miami. I think Johnson could have been a guy who could have benefited, but hey, when you're getting offered 3 years, $30.75 million with $21.25 guaranteed with $11 million signing bonus, I guess I don't blame him for wanting to go back to New Orleans. But I just, I don't, that whole offense to me is a complete dumpster fire. We don't even know if Chris Olave is going to come back. You could say like, well, if that's the case, maybe he'll have more opportunities given his way, but he's not really done a lot with them. So I don't know. There weren't a lot of high-end tight ends available, but they've got Taysom Hill that they've had involved. They still haven't cut him, although they probably should have. They've got Foster Moreau. Not a good situation.
I guess, why do you hate him? I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, I think it's absolutely fine that he goes back to the New Orleans Saints.
You do? Why?
Yeah. I mean, why not? I mean, Derek Carr was hurt for a lot of the year, and he still had 50 catches, 548 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, Derek Carr is not the most exciting, but he can definitely throw it, and he's shown he throws it he can throw it to the tight end position. I mean, Johnson has had decent years and games, with the Saints and for fantasy.
He's a streamer. I just think that he could have went to a more appealing.
Yeah, but I mean, tight end is a crapshoot position regardless, and I mean. I think he's
a guy. You're telling me if the Commanders didn't re-sign Ertz and he signed to Washington, you wouldn't be more ecstatic about it?
I don't know.
Or what if he signed with Denver and they didn't sign Evan Engram?
Well, I was really happy I was happy they didn't bring Juwan Johnson in.
Oh,
I didn't want that to continue to be the Denver Saints. I'd much rather have Evan Engram, and Evan Engram was also cheaper. That's the thing. I think
Evan Engram.
from a contract standpoint, I get why you don't like it, but from a fantasy standpoint, I don't think it's that bad that he goes back to the Saints. You mentioned it. What other options are there in this offense to throw it to, especially if Olave doesn't come back? I mean, MVS is out now. I mean, what guys like Tipton? I mean, or guys that they're going to draft? I mean,
they've got Shaheed, they've got Olave. To me, I don't want the Saints at all. I mean, maybe other than Alvin Kamara, but other than that, I don't want anything to do with the Saints. And to me, that's my where I'm coming from. Is I understand the logic to say like, well, who else is out there? But sometimes there's just teams that you want nothing to do with because they just don't provide any value, and I think they're one of them. And I don't have much belief that they're going to change things around either.
I mean, that's fine, but I mean, hey, you want to avoid him. I mean, Shaheed, when he was healthy, he was providing a lot of fantasy value, having great games with those deep touchdowns, and that was also from your guy that you're bashing here, Derek Carr.
What have you ever liked Derek Carr? Give me a break.
It's not that I don't like him. I mean, he's a guy that also doesn't like he's been able to support guys. He's not the best quarterback, but he's a streamer in his own right for fantasy, and it's not like he's a negative play for allowing other guys to exceed, or he can't support wide receivers or other options on this team. He can. I think there could have been worse options out there for Juwan Johnson than just going back to the Saints. I just don't necessarily think I don't hate it as much as you do, and I'm not sure why you hate it so much.
I think in a tight end landscape, which is quite barren, there are some opportunities that he could have went to a different team, and I would have liked the scenery change and the opportunity that he would have been given by going somewhere else. It's just more of the same, and it's not all that exciting. But that does it for this episode. We talked about some players that we loved and some that we hated. Some where Joe and I agreed, and others we didn't. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.